Cooperative learning, an educational model of learning. So what is cooperative learning? Well, it was actually developed from social constructivist theories which say that individuals make sense of information and construct new knowledge through activity and social activity in everyday context. That's by Barrett, Colby, and Dyson, 2016. It's a learning model not unlike the flipped classroom that encourages engaged, active, and creative learning. So here are some of the key factors or key goals that a good classroom using the cooperative learning model should be working for. The first one is group makeup and size. So groups should ideally be 4 to 6 students in size and should be as diverse in nature as possible. For instance, you'll want to pair students of differing abilities, genders, backgrounds, etc., so that they can kind of just learn from each other and learn to get along with each other. Next is positive interdependence. So each member of the group should understand that they are responsible for the group. They're no longer just working for themselves, but for the group as a whole. However, in light of that, the individuality or the individual accountability of the student should not be lost. So the grade for group work should only be a minor component of the overall grade, so that each student remains individually accountable. And then last is preparing for group work, and this is more for the teacher's benefit. Students should be introduced to the concept of group work and allowed to slowly build up rapport and camaraderie. As they're given more experience in a group learning environment, they'll slowly build the necessary skills to succeed in this cooperative setting. So what are the pros and cons of this model of learning? Well, let's look at the pros first. So studies have shown that students in this cooperative learning environment actually take more responsibility for their own learning. As we talked about, the teacher becomes more of a facilitator in their learning experience instead of the sole provider of knowledge. And therefore, students are more engaged and they are actually taking more responsibility and creating their own learning, which is really neat. The next is that students tend to develop higher level thinking skills. So as they're discussing and they're working collaboratively with their classmates, they're solving problems and they are working together to complete projects. And through that, they are using those higher level thinking skills. There's also been shown an increased level of student satisfaction with this style of learning. Studies have shown that students report a higher level of satisfaction with their learning when utilizing a cooperative learning model. And because of this, studies have also shown a higher retention rate of students in this setting. So students, when they enjoy their learning and they enjoy the classroom, they're going to stay in school longer, and that's ultimately what we want. Obviously, with pros comes cons. And so some of the cons, some teachers have reported that it's harder to cover all of the material when it has to be presented in a way that works for group learning. They've also reported maybe less control. So similar to one of the cons that we talked about in the flipped learning model last time. When students are engaged and they're in groups and they're working collaboratively on these group projects, they tend to be more noisy and rowdy compared to what they would be in a traditional environment where they're just sitting quietly and absorbing what the teacher is saying. One of the other cons that people have discussed is in this model of learning, it can be sometimes easier for a lower level student to, in essence, ride on the learning of a higher achieving student in the group. It can be easier for a student who may not be as vocal and who may not be at the highest academic level in the group just to simply repeat or take on the learning of the other students in the group and let them do all the talking, research, or learning for the group project. However, as a teacher, you can be aware of this, and as you're observing and you're assessing, you can assign groups and you can kind of just come alongside and support those students who may need that extra help in that area. So next, tips and strategies for implementation. Number one, just realize your new role as a teacher. You are now a facilitator of learning experiences, and you're not the sole conveyor of information anymore. And that's also similar to the flipped classroom that we talked about last time. Next, clear objectives. As the teacher, you need to have and create and set clear objectives that you're looking to accomplish within these groups. Is it a certain learning standard, a specific social skill that you're trying to teach? Once you have clear objectives, try to stick only to those objectives. It's very easy to get off track when you're in this group setting. So it's best if you just go ahead and stick to your objectives and just try to accomplish those. Also, you're going to need to set goals for not only the group, but also the individual learning itself. So some teachers can find this challenging to create meaningful goals for not only the group as a whole, but also for each individual student. Solutions for students who may lack social skills. Some students may not possess the skills necessary to function well in group yet. So they may be shy, they may be uncomfortable participating in this type of setting, and as a teacher, it's your job to find the solutions that will help these students work through these challenges. And you absolutely can do that. You just have to try to work on that and find those solutions to help those students. Next is when you decide to implement this into your classroom, if you decide to implement this, a slow transition. And I believe we also discussed that with the flipped model classroom. Students need time to adjust and develop the necessary skills for this learning model. So if a student is used to just sitting in a desk absorbing knowledge, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to get them to participate in this group setting. So you'll want to try to work through that slowly and build up their skill set for that. Next, assign student roles. It helps to keep things organized and to ensure participation by all students if they're each given a designated role within the group. So for instance, one may be a researcher, you might say that one is a scribe and he writes down everything, or one's the reader and she's going to be the one reading all the things that have been written down. One could be the summarizer, one's the organizer, maybe one is the spokesperson when they give their presentation, and the list could go on and on. But if they all have a designated job, it's easier for them to kind of jump in and fill those roles. Each student should have a designated assignment within the group. Next, monitor and observe. As a teacher, you're going to be observing, and observing. Monitor the groups, reinforce collaborative behaviors, conduct observations, and assess their social skills. And you as the teacher are best equipped to do all of this. Next is assessment. So sometimes this can be a tough one, and if they're in a group setting, you might be asking, well, how do I even do assessments? These can be traditional paper and pencil tests. They can measure group performance or the group products if they're working together on a project. It can be both an individual and a group assessment. So you can give a grade for the group as a whole, and then you can give grades based on the individual performance, maybe going back to those assignments that you gave them. How did they perform in those individual roles? Or you could have students even complete an individual task after the group learning. So they could write a reflection piece about what was learned, or maybe how the group worked together, etc. So there's many ideas for assessment. And then this last one needs no explanation. Consistent communication with parents, principals, and the administration is imperative. So there's different methods for using this learning model. These are just some great different techniques or fun ideas on how to implement this group learning into the classroom. And I won't go over each one individually for the sake of time, but definitely, if you get a chance, look up some of these if you need ideas or just a variation on how to implement cooperative learning into your classroom. So there's the Think, Pair, Share, which is a teacher asks a question, the student stops to think about it, and then they turn to the person who they're paired with, and they give that student the answer, and then they discuss that answer. Then you have the jigsaw method, which is where each person in the group has a specific area to research, so this would lend itself better towards a research style project. Then after they've all researched their individual areas, they'll come back together, discuss that, and then present on their individual topic. So that's one method. The other ones, you've got the everybody talks method, the numbered heads together, and the round robin, round table method. And like I said, I'm not going to go over all those, but if you get a chance, look those up. They're great methods for implementing this. And then, is this an effective learning model? So we've talked about it, we've seen ways to implement it, but is it actually effective? So research by the Education Research Consumer Guide of the Office of Education Research and Improvement shows that more than 70 major studies by federally sponsored research centers, field-initiated investigations, and local districts examining their own practices have demonstrated cooperative learning's effectiveness on a range of outcomes. So that's a long sentence that basically says that the educational research and improvement, this group has interviewed or done major studies over 70 different test groups. And yes, they have seen that this model of learning is effective. They make the statement that when two necessary key elements, group goals and individual accountability, are used together, and we talked about both of those, the effects on achievement are consistently positive. So out of those 70 major studies they did, the effects are consistently positive. So yes, research does show that this works. According to another study conducted with a group of preschoolers, Mrs. Akay found that there was a significant difference between the pre-test scores of those in the trial group and the post-test scores. However, there was not a significant difference seen in the control group. So the results of this particular study show that cooperative learning is more effective than compared to traditional teaching methods. And that was in a preschool setting. And then the one last study that I'm going to go over was done at the University of Alicante, conducted in a classroom of English learners. And it showed that the cooperative learning model helped students develop social competencies such as leadership, conflict management, and cooperation. And of course, this was at a university level. And it also showed that it promotes students' learning and academic achievement. So in conclusion, the research definitely indicates that there are benefits to be gained by choosing to implement a cooperative learning model. It's one of the easier models to implement as well, and it can be done without significant cost or classroom modifications. Because of this, I would definitely think that it's a learning model that needs to be utilized more often and could be utilized as well with great results.